Part 1. Compulsory Heterosexuality versus Comp Het. Adrienne Rich's 1984 essay Compulsory Heterosexuality and the Lesbian Existence centers on the concept that society reinforces heterosexuality and heteronormativity as not only standard, but as the only option for living. You're taught to behave in a certain way, you're taught you'll grow up to marry a man one day and be monogamous, and same-sex attraction is erased from history, so you don't even know that it's an option. To Adrienne Rich, heterosexuality is a political institution, it's patriarchy, rather than a sexual orientation in the way that we tend to think of it. Rich sees lesbian existence as something very much political. This isn't lesbians versus bisexuals versus straight women, this is a political identity seeking to challenge the structure of patriarchy. Rich sees the idea of heterosexual relationships versus lesbian relationships as a false dichotomy. This isn't about saying you can't date a man, it's about trying to dismantle the cultural institution which reinforces patriarchy and oppresses women. Comp Het is short for compulsory heterosexuality, and while it clearly originates from the Adrienne Rich essay, I would argue that it doesn't really refer to her theory of compulsory heterosexuality. Comp Het seems to have been born on the internet, and as far as I can tell using Google custom date searches, seems to come primarily from Tumblr beginning around 2016. When I refer to compulsory heterosexuality, I will be referring to Adrienne Rich's theory. When I refer to Comp Het, I'm talking about the 2010s internet concept. Comp Het definitely refers in part to Rich's essay, but the idea is that heteronormative standards created by society make women consider not only that they aren't capable of attraction to other women, but that they enjoy sexual experiences with men when they don't. This enjoyment is influenced by the social acceptability of heterosexuality. You might be tricked into thinking that you like your boyfriend because of the societal approval of it and how that makes you feel. So it doesn't just make a lesbian think she's straight by not giving her the option of being a lesbian, but it also makes lesbians think they're bisexual when they're not, almost as if there's a sort of binormativity as well as heteronormativity, to the point of making them think that they're enjoying men's company or sex with men when they're not. This extends beyond just having bad sex and thinking that's the best you can have. The Am I a Lesbian Comp Het Master Doc, which I talked about in another video and has become a very popular resource regarding the concept of Comp Het, cites sexual fantasies about men as evidence that you may be a lesbian because they're sort of the wrong type of fantasies. They're not fantasies a woman who is really attracted to men would have. The idea in regards to this, as far as I understand, is that you may feel very well that you are enjoying it, but your enjoyment is fake. You think you enjoy men, but you can't tell that you don't enjoy them. You think you like sex with men, but you really don't enjoy it. Which, okay, let's take that uncritically. That may be possible for some lesbians. I can't see an interpretation of Adrienne Rich's essay on compulsory heterosexuality which says that your pleasure is fake. Rich doesn't seem to even be suggesting that a sort of Kinsey 6 lesbian would be tricked into thinking she likes sex with men as much as she likes having sex with women, just that lesbians may think that being straight is the only option. To me, Rich's essay reads in a very bisexual way even. The problem is not that you enjoy sex with men, but that you do not know that sex with women is an option. You do not know that falling in love with a woman is an option because society has erased lesbian love from history and culture. In my Am I a Lesbian video, we explored in detail this kind of political lesbianism, which is actually kind of inherently bisexual and aiming for a bisexual utopia where patriarchy is over, so political lesbianism isn't required. And I think Rich's essay is very compatible with this idea. This isn't lesbians versus straights, it's patriarchy versus feminist rebellion. In the last video, we compared lesbianism as an ethnic model, as essence, as something you're born with, to lesbian as political identity. Rich's ideas about compulsory heterosexuality are about that political identity, but the online Comp Het is, in large part, instead about the essence, and there's this idea attached to it that you're a true lesbian being tricked into thinking you might be bisexual or straight. You can totally be bisexual in Rich's version of lesbian as a political identity. You can fuck men. It would just be better if the men didn't have any power over you. You steal his money and handcuff him to the bed and you've got yourself a perfectly ethical lesbian encounter. And I guess it's also fine if he doesn't have a face and you peg him. There's a way of framing this I've seen popping up quite a lot online, this phrasing of having Comp Het. You're a lesbian with Comp Het. You are a Comp Het lesbian. Like, it's maybe a mental illness. I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. I'm just saying that this isn't what Adrienne Rich was talking about with the original compulsory heterosexuality. And I'm not saying there's not something to the idea of comp het. I'm not saying comp het isn't real. And I think people online coming together to find shared experiences can be valuable. But I think the validity of comp het has been in part dependent on its ties to lesbian history and academia. But those ties are a little tenuous. I think we need more voices and perspectives on comp het before it enters sort of the canon of queer theory. Part 2. Comp het versus comp homo. I believe that I have experienced comp het, in particular since I transitioned. My partner and I are polyamorous, and for a little while, a few years ago, we were dating a guy, or more accurately, someone who looked like a guy. We'll call them, for the sake of this video, Double Trouble. Double Trouble was taller than me, read very easily as a man, and when we were out together holding hands, I had my first experience of what it felt like to be a woman dating a guy in public and the social acceptability of that. Out with my girlfriend, I'm sometimes scared to hold hands, but I didn't have to be scared at all in this context. And it felt really good to just blend in and feel normal like that. Good in a way that being with my girlfriend doesn't feel. That's such a sad thing to say. Supposedly, that is the feeling which influences comp het, which makes people think they're enjoying a relationship when they really aren't. And I'm totally into the idea of seeming heterosexual. God, it's so validating. I love it. But I love my girlfriend more. And being seen as gay is hard, but I wouldn't give up my love for my partner for that approval. But I've always felt what I will term here comp homo. Ever since coming out as bisexual, I've had to face constant doubts about my sexuality, including pressures from the gay community to identify as gay or just go back to straight land. And being bi and trans isn't exactly a celebrated queer experience. I felt an enormous pressure to prove myself. I would kiss people, sometimes even fuck people, just to prove how gay I really was. I sometimes also had to prove how straight I was. Apparently some gay and straight people thought it was a cute flirting to challenge my sexual orientation, which is really coercive and creepy in hindsight. I felt that rejection from the gay community would leave me with no one. Being abandoned by the gay community was a really frightening prospect for me. Even now, I know that the validity of my opinions on all of this, my right to even make this video, depends, at least in part, on whether I am gay enough. A problem I had with a lot of the Am I a Lesbian Master Doc was that it doesn't have you measure the difference between your attractions. To me, it often reads not as, I like having sex with men, but I like having sex with women way more, but more like, I like having sex with men and women, but my enjoyment of the sex with men is a fake enjoyment. The document also lists issues such as domestic abuse and mental illness as signs of being a lesbian. In a way, I think the Am I a Lesbian Master Doc is kind of unintentionally a comp homo list, trying to help you prove to yourself, if you want the proof, that you are gay enough to identify as a lesbian. It helps you prove your love of men is fake if you want that, and thereby you are gay enough. The stance I took in my video was that if you are bisexual, the doc could be quite misleading, in part because bisexuals are clearly also experiencing comp het. For instance, if you are a bisexual woman who is a top and you like femme girls and femme boys, then the doc proposes that it's possible that your liking femme boys is fake, which could be true, maybe. But there's already a huge biphobic problem in bisexuals' experience where we're constantly told that what we enjoy is fake, and having yet another source for this your attraction is fake can be pretty harmful. But then the problem people had with that take in my video is not necessarily that the take is bad, but that I'm not allowed to discuss comp het at all because I don't identify as a lesbian. Part 3. My credentials. I have been in what you might call a lesbian relationship for 5 years. My partner and I have known each other even longer than that. We live together, we have 2 cats. It's very, very gay. I mean, the cats seal the deal, right? We envision possibly having kids one day, maybe even owning an apartment when we are very old. My partner is a woman. It's legally very gay. The year before we started dating, I had been involved with another woman, so that takes us back about 6 years for gay dating. The couple of years before that, I was dating men, and the years before that, I had a long-term relationship with a woman. So I just want to be clear that the last 6 years of my life have centered around partnering with women, living as a woman, dating women, having a long-term partnership with a woman. I want to make that clear because there's a common criticism of bisexual women that they're invading lesbian spaces, bringing men into the spaces, and all the while reaping the benefits of heterosexual privilege. I don't think the last 6 years of my life has involved any heterosexual privilege, except sometimes a stranger looks at me on the street, I guess, and when I'm alone and assumes I'm straight, I guess. I've been harassed on the streets for holding hands with my partner. We often stop holding hands when we pass men because it frightens me. We're very cautious about where we publicly display our affection. I've actually been harassed more for being a same-sex couple than I have for looking trans. We've been turned away from renting apartments because of being a same-sex couple. In the country we live in, we're not allowed to adopt children or even opt for in vitro fertilization, so we may never be able to have kids. My overall experience of gayness, if you will, sleeping with people of the same gender identity, dating them, loving them, has spanned 15 years. I'm also trans, which to some people could be an issue, but I've actually been really lucky in that the people who hate me for making the last comp het video have been real trans allies, and while telling me to kill myself, they really respect my gender, which is really heartwarming in a way. Like, people seem to hate the idea of me as a bisexual more than the idea of me as trans. So now that that is established, my experience is irrelevant. My partner and I came across the comp het doc, and immediately it set off alarm bells for the reasons detailed in the other video. I spent 35 full minutes discussing theory from lesbian writers, as well as analysing the document. It's all there if you want to go and see it. I know bisexuals who are confused by this discourse, including my co-writer on the video, and I've had comments on the video from people who had the same problem, and I've also read more responses on Tumblr. I think people who aren't bisexual find it really hard to understand how confusing being bi can be. To be able to experience attraction and pleasure and then be told it's fake is deeply confusing. And I'm not talking about the master doc, I'm talking about all of society, including the gay community. But I would think gay men and lesbians also experience this issue of being told their attraction is fake, but it still seems like they're unable to appreciate how that feels for a bisexual. We spend our whole lives being told our experiences are fake, literally by gay people as well as straight people. So to have something which is quite celebrated as a kind of authority on this issue fuels this fire and can be incredibly stressful within a much broader context than just cyber lesbian master docs. Most of the criticism I received was not related to the content of the document or the content of my video. When it was related to the content, it was mostly about the general tone. I didn't take the document seriously enough, for example, and I laughed at one point about the idea of fucking men with no face, which I'm sorry if any lesbians who fantasize about fucking faceless men found that offensive. I thought it was pretty harmless to leave that in. It was a genuine laugh, but I can see how some lesbians who do like to fantasize about that might find it offensive. I wouldn't want someone to laugh at my sexual fantasies because they're pretty hilarious, as is my sexual reality. Also, I took the piss on Twitter and said the doc was telling bisexuals that we're gay if we like pegging or something like that, which people found upsetting, basically because it was a stupid joke on my part and people took it very seriously because they feel the doc deserves a kind of respect and reverence, and I do regret saying that. I'm sorry about that. It was clickbaity and silly. Another prominent criticism I've received is in large part that I have not killed myself or gone to hell. Apparently comp het is considered by many to be a lesbian-only term, so you can't ever apply it to bisexuals, even if bisexuals might experience something essentially identical. I was told repeatedly, this document isn't for you, so why are you reading it? Well, the answer to that is it's made for people who are asking the question, am I a lesbian? And those people asking that question probably do not identify as a lesbian. Many ID as bisexual, so that's why I read it. I've been working with the bi community for over a decade now, it's kind of my thing. But the general consensus is that bisexuals should not have an opinion on comp het, which I don't really feel that video was an opinion on comp het, it was an opinion on the master doc. My experience might be very similar, if not identical, to some lesbians' experiences. Many lesbians will date men, many lesbians will be single for a long time. It may be that some lesbians have not experienced as long-term relationships as I have with women, don't have as much experience in the LGBT community, maybe experience less homophobia, while other lesbians may have experienced way more. But whether or not I'm a victim of lesbophobia, whether I am living right now in fear of whether we'll be able to find an accepting landlord when we have to move to a new apartment, whether I'm scared of holding my partner's hand in public, that is completely irrelevant. My opinion on lesbian issues is irrelevant, even though I could, in theory, have experienced worse lesbophobia than some lesbians, specifically some of the 14-year-olds telling me to kill myself. Those lesbians' opinions will always be more important than my opinion, purely based on the fact that I don't identify as a lesbian, not which of us has experienced worse homophobic discrimination. Even if I wasn't a real lesbian, but believed I was a lesbian, I think that would have afforded my opinion more credibility, even if I had less experience with dating women than I do, even if I didn't have a girlfriend, even if I wasn't dating anyone. So let's think about identity. As we talked about in a few of my other videos, there are a few different ideas of what identity can mean. A few years ago, I went through a period of time where I considered identifying as a lesbian. I really liked the affirmation the word lesbian gave me. It felt gender affirming. It felt affirming of my relationship to my partner. I was into it. Presumably, to anyone who doesn't hate trans people, being a non-binary lesbian would be a perfect qualifier for being able to talk about the Comphet Master Doc, as the creator of the Master Doc was also a non-binary lesbian. The main reason I didn't go with it in the end was just because I got the impression that most lesbians hate people like me. I felt safer identifying as bisexual because as a bisexual, no one is really going to tell you what you can or can't be or do. So I made a choice not to identify with lesbian. The Master Doc itself says that you can choose to be a lesbian, and that is a model of identity, a pretty significant model. There are now tons of labels to choose from, and choice is vital to the culture which surrounds them. You don't have to identify as omnisexual if you don't want to. If you prefer polysexual, that's your choice. Choice is vital. And even in terms of the political lesbianism discussed in the video, that is also about choice. But the alternative model is that your sexuality is not a choice at all, but an essence. You're born with it. It's not Maybelline. Or it is made inside you and it is an absolute fixed truth. You might choose to identify as bisexual, but your essence is lesbian, or vice versa. If we consider lesbianism an essence and not a choice, and we consider that a lot of lesbians have a hard time recognizing their own essence, and that a lot of lesbians need something like the Master Doc to affirm their lesbianism, then it is possible that I am, by that definition, a lesbian, whether I choose to identify as one or not. If I am, in essence, a lesbian, and I choose not to identify as a lesbian, that is why I'm not allowed to comment on Comphet. It's not because I'm not a lesbian, it's because I choose to identify as bisexual. The problem people had with me commenting on the document wasn't because I lacked a lesbian lifestyle or experience, it was entirely because of my identity. And it is entirely possible that I'm a lesbian and I don't want to admit it. Obviously, a lot of things in the Master Doc resonated with me. It really depends on how you define lesbian too, which the Master Doc does broadly enough for me to fit. A reason that someone like me might avoid identifying with a label in favor of another may well be something called identity protective cognition. Identity protective cognition refers to the tendency of culturally diverse individuals to selectively credit and dismiss evidence in patterns that reflect the beliefs that predominate in their group. So if, for instance, I'm invested in my identity as a bisexual and indisputable scientific evidence shows up which proves that bisexuals don't exist, that perhaps bisexuals were a communist conspiracy created by aliens with Russian accents, I might outright dismiss the evidence because of my investment in my identity, although I'm kind of into that idea, to be honest. Or perhaps I am very much invested in my identity as a lesbian, but that identity hinges on, for example, the validity of a Comphet Master Doc, then criticism of that document, no matter how valid, is going to be something I'm resistant to, because it is incompatible with my worldview and identity. I feel like one major problem with the document is that it doesn't encourage you to go out there and just live new experiences to understand yourself. The idea is that based on the information you already have, you can figure it out. But if this document can potentially lead bisexuals to think that they are lesbian and your identity as a lesbian hinges on the validity of this document, then of course you're going to feel enormously defensive. Which is why I encouraged everyone at the end of my last video to just go out and experience. You can't learn who you are based on stuff like this. Date a girl, love a girl, eat some lesbian ass. Honestly, you're not going to figure this stuff out on the internet. Your joy and your attraction for women is something you have to live. And I encourage you to find that, whether you're a lesbian or bi. I think the problem people had with my criticism wasn't necessarily that I had an opinion on comphet at all, but that my perceived opinion was threatening to the concept of comphet. If I'd made a video as a bisexual saying, comphet is amazing and perfect and everyone should read this document, no one would have told me that I'm not allowed to talk about comphet. The problem lay entirely in the perception that I was criticizing comphet as a bisexual. The whole ordeal had a pretty significant effect on my mental health. I have really severe anxiety. I live in a fairly constant state of worry. And these last couple of months, I've been really brutally depressed. It made me really sad that people were not only angry about the video, but in large part not watching the video at all. They were just mad at how I posted it on Twitter, and they were mad at the title and the concept. I honestly didn't realize that people felt so passionately about the kind of sanctity of the document. I made a clickbaity post because I really thought people would have no idea what the video was about and it might make them engage with it. But for some lesbians, it seems their entire identity as a lesbian hinges on the validity of this document. So they feel very strongly that it should not be criticized. I just want to say to any lesbians watching, you are totally valid. You don't need that shit. Be a lesbian, enjoy your lesbianism. You're valid. I don't agree that the doc should be beyond criticism. I don't agree that anything should be beyond criticism. Criticize me by all means. It'll give me terrible anxiety, but I can't expect not to be criticized. I was waiting for legit criticism of the actual content in my video, and I never really got much. It was in large part aggression and defensiveness and cruelty. And when someone was able to articulate their opinions to me, they usually didn't cite anything specific I said in the video. One person on Twitter made a long thread where they said that the video was 35 minutes of just laughing at a 19-year-old lesbian, which isn't true. First of all, I barely mentioned that lesbian and I didn't use their real name, which I know, and I only cited their Tumblr because the blog is dead. At least half the video wasn't even talking about the master dog, but talking about theory, which I then applied to the dog. Another criticism I received was that lesbians need the message, attraction is meant to feel good, and I needed to know that I was a lesbian to escape abuse. And I think these are messages all queer women need. Or even all women, or just all people. There seem to be arguments regarding things like domestic violence, which people think lesbians need more than anyone else. Bisexual women don't take domestic violence as badly, apparently. A prominent lesbian in my community once said to me that bisexual women should know better than to fall victim to domestic violence. Domestic violence in lesbian relationships is actually surprisingly prominent. Research even suggests that same-sex partner domestic abuse is just as common as in other sex partner relationships, sometimes even higher. Researchers propose that part of the reason that may be is because queer people believe that they deserve it due to internalized homophobia. On a related note, both bisexual men and bisexual women are experiencing higher rates of domestic violence than lesbian and gay people and straight people. Clearly, these are universal messages which are important to all of us. I really have a huge problem with the idea of telling lesbians that they can solve abuse by avoiding men. Men are definitely a problem, but research is not backing up the idea that living as a lesbian is defending anyone from unhealthy relationships. You can totally gaslight a woman into thinking she's in a healthy relationship as long as it's gay with this kind of rhetoric. I think it's misguided and I think it's unethical. Personally, I think there's a tendency to romanticize same-sex relationships as part of battling our own internalized homophobia, and I get that, it makes sense, but in reality, being gay is just morally neutral. I do wonder if my tone should have been different in the video in order to be more appealing to a lesbian audience, but I wasn't really aiming for a lesbian audience, to be honest. I made this for bisexuals who felt confused by the dog. I was told, this dog isn't for you, you shouldn't be reading it. Well, if that's the reasoning, then lesbians shouldn't be watching my video because it's for bisexuals. I received quite a lot of responses from bisexuals who were confused or stressed or had bad experiences with the dog. One very angry comment I received asked if I'm trying to say that the document should just be deleted forever. I don't think any document is infallible. A constitution will always be amended. A book on theory will always be reprinted with revisions and reinterpreted by other authors. I don't think this doc should be the end of the road. The unfortunate truth of the doc is that you can't edit it. No one can change it. It just exists and it's praised as is. And no one is making a replacement doc as far as I've seen. I think if someone were to make one, they need to consult bisexuals, because if the point is to figure out if the reader is a lesbian, you need to figure out the clear distinctions between a bisexual woman's real attraction to men and a comphet lesbian's fake attraction to men. And the doc just doesn't have that. It's hard enough drawing that line between gay and bi as it is, as I covered in a recent video. If this document cannot accurately distinguish between bisexuals and lesbians, then it's not doing its job. We all want this document to give people a very accurate idea of what it is to be a lesbian. Everyone wants that. It's in everyone's best interest to improve upon it, not to put it on a pedestal. This document was made by a very young person, put together from posts by other very young people. Surely there are lesbians and bisexuals out there with more experience who are much better equipped to make something much better. But maybe it's also time to challenge the idea that identity is a system of absolutes and that people really need to pin themselves down. I think the LGBT rights movement isn't meant to be about identity. It's meant to be about freedom to live life in pursuit of happiness. Life is a tough enough journey as it is. Let's just enjoy it. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you want notifications for my next videos, hit the little bell doodah to give you notifications. Thanks to all my patrons, and a special thanks to Aaron, ES, Joel, Nina, Susie S, and Juicy Fantasy Queen Plot Hookups. If you'd like to see your name up here too, or just want to support my videos anonymously, check out my Patreon, where you can also get some special treats. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.